Good evening, everybody.
Kavod Harav, how are you? Chag
Baruch
Sameach.
Hashem. Chag Sameach. Thank you. Okay. It looks like we're doing a bet. So it says in the Torah, "Ve'en merakadin hakemach betechila b'yom tov afilu al yedei shinui." Right. So we already said that we're not supposed to measure the flour when we bake. That's one prohibition. Now we're talking about a different one, which is the sifting. So, right, it says, right, the lechatchila should not do sifting on Yom Tov, even by way of shinui, right? So why is that? Because you could have done it before, right? You're not losing anything by doing it before. So therefore, it should be done before, if possible. If you remember. Yeah, so it says in Bet Yosef regarding that, Chen katav arosh bepek en sadin, right? It says in the Rosh, ve'aran katav sham, says the Ran, garsinan b'gemara, that it's written in the Gemara there, Pu kazim kama meulach בהורתא רק דין בנהר דעה. לפי גרסה זו נראה שאפילו ריקוד מותר בשינוי, וכך העידו בתוספות. So, right, he brings the Gemara here in Iran that it seems like it's allowed to do it. על רבנו שמואל, שהיה מתיר לרקד בשינוי, אבל רש"י גורס כמה מהורתא הדרן מנהר דעה, כלומר, חוזרות בעיר כדי לשנות, אבל ריקוד לעולם אסור. Right, so we have here two different texts in the Gemara. According to one text, it's allowed to do it. According to the other text, it's not allowed. Right, so it seems like the text of Rashi seems to say that it's not allowed, and that's what the Torah says, right? The Torah paskins that it's not allowed. Okay, so then he goes on. So Rambam also says like Rashi, right? That it's forbidden. Rashba, also the Rashba, afilu b'shinui asur, even with shinui. There you go, right? עד כאן. והתוספות כתבו, דיש לסמוך על רשב"ם לעניין להתיר לשפחה גויה תחילת הרקדה על ידי שינוי, אבל אנו לעצמנו אין לסמוך. So it says Tosfot something interesting. So he says, you know what, you can be lenient to let the goy do it with a shinui. Okay, can you imagine the goy does it with a shinui? But he says, ourselves, we should not do it at all. Right? Only the goy. Interesting. Okay. That's the end of that. And then it goes on, אבל אם ריקדו מאתמול ונפל בו צרור או כיסם, right? But then we said, right, but if he did it yesterday, if he did the sifting yesterday, the day before, and then all of a sudden, right, falls in there something, some impurity, right? Pebble or a twig, right? And now you need to get that out, right? So then, right, it's a little bit different. Also, another scenario we mentioned is that he just wants to like re-sift it, he wants to make it more white, right? More baguette style. So he wants to make it cleaner. So the question is, are you allowed to do it, right? If you want to do a re-sift, if you sifted it already on Erev Yom Tov. So regarding this, right, says Beit Yosef, Sham Tan Rabbanan en shonin kemach b'Yom Tov mishum Rabbi Papos veRabbi Yehuda ben Betera amru shonin v'shavin. So, right, it seems like there's a machlok about that too, right? What else is new, right? There's a machlok about everything. So, right, one opinion says you can re-sift. One opinion says you cannot re-sift. V'shavin she'im nafal letochot tzoror or kisam shonin. Right, but they all agree, right, that if some impurity fell in there, as we said, right, so then you're allowed to do it. Everybody agrees with that. So the machloket is only when there's no impurity, right? Just you want to re-sift it for, to make it more white, right? More clean flour. Okay, good. So let's go on. נפל לתוכו צרו או כיסם ששונים לדמית. תביטו דרב יוסף נעלה קמחה אגבה דמהותה אמר לה חזה דענה ריפתא מעליה בעינה. Right, so then he brings a story, right, to some lady that she was a wife of Rabbi Yosef, and she was lenient about this. Tביטו דרב אשר נעלה קמחה אגבה דפתורה. So, right, it seems like the wife of Rav Asher would do it with a shinui, right? What does that mean? Resifting, right? I'm talking about that. Amar Rav Asher, ha dinan barta the Rav, Rami bar Chama veRami bar Chama mara de Uvda haba ve'elav de Chazia mebe Nasha lahavat avda. Uperesh Rashi agava de mehota be'achorei anafa kedei leshanot. Right. So Rashi says, what was the shinui that she did? She did it with the with the back with the sifter upside down, right? Can you imagine? You ever do that before, sifting upside down? Okay. Today you have to ask people if they ever did sifting at all, because I don't know if anybody sifts today, but people still do it, People who are serious people, serious bakers, they do sift. Okay, whatever. So ריפתא דמעליה אין את צריכה לשנות לשונים קמח ביום טוב, right, אגבה דבתורה, אחורי השולחן, שיש לו תוך, והוא הייתה שונה מקמח על אחוריו משום שינוי, right? So there were two types of shinui they were doing, right? One lady was doing, as we said, with the back of the sifter, right, upside down, and the other one was doing, sifting on the table, which is also a shinui, instead of like sifting into a container, right, whatever. Okay, whatever. והתוספות כתוב אגבה דפתורה אחורי השולחן, כמו אגבה דמהותה, ואפשר לפרש על אגב השולחן ממש וחשוב שינוי, כפי שדרך לרקד בעריבה. Right, so there's two different ways of explaining what it means regarding sifting on a table, right? So one opinion says the shinui was that he would turn the table upside down and sift on the back of the table, right? And the other one says no, it was on top of the table. It's just that sifting on the table itself is a shinui, because you don't usually do that. You usually have a container, right? Whatever. That's Okay. So כתב הר"ן, דתמא דאין שונין פירש רש"י, משום דאפשר מאתמול פירוש. Right. So Rashi explains. Ran says, right. What is the prohibition? Why is it prohibited to do sifting on Yom Tov? So he said you could have done it before, right? What's the big deal, Or it's going to make it taste any different if you do it before Yom Tov? It's going to be the same, right? What difference does it make? So then why, on purpose, to leave this kind of work for Yom Tov itself? When there's no need for that. Okay. Good. ומצד דרבנן דאילו מדרייתא לא פעם מפלגינן באוכל נפש, right? So explains the Bet Yosef. I'm sorry, it's not the Bet Yosef really, it's the Ran, right? The Ran is saying over here, he says, I'll explain to you what the Rashi means, right? I'll explain the explanation, right? So Rashi, as we said, he says that he could have done it before, right? So the explanation to that is what? That it's only rabbinically forbidden, that shows you, right? The fact that you say you could have done it before, that means it's rabbinically forbidden. But according to the Torah, it's allowed to do this on Yom Tov. Why? Because it's it's a food related kind of thing, right? It's for consumption. So really, according to the Torah, right, things which are for consumption are allowed. And came the rabbis and told you, right? Even though the Torah allows this on Yom Tov, but right, because you could have done it before, so don't do it. That's what we're saying. Okay. Ben Afshar, Ben Afshar. Right. So Veshavin She'im. So he's telling you, right, that when it comes to the Torah, we don't make this kind of distinction at all. You could have done it yesterday. No such a thing like that, according to the Torah. This is only rabbinical. But according to the Torah, it doesn't matter. You're allowed to do all these things because it's food related, right, for consumption and so forth. So there's no difference. But the rabbis came, as we said, right? Veshavin she'im nafal letachot tzeror o kisam shishonin. So then he says, right, that everybody agrees, though, as we just mentioned, right, a couple of minutes ago, that when it comes to, if something fell in there, some impurity, then you're allowed to re-sift it, right, for that purpose. That's okay. Because, now we can't tell you, oh, why didn't you do that yesterday? Because, what it fell in today. What has, that doesn't apply, right? That's not going to help me to do it yesterday. So that's the story, right? בכיסא משונים שדהה לא אפשר מאתמול דביום טוב נפל. Right, like I told you. ואחרים פירשו דמשום הכי אסר תנא קמא שאף על פי שרוב בני אדם אין שונים אלא ליומו. אפילו הכי אסור דמחלף למלכד שהיא מלאכה שנעשית לזמן מרובה. וקיימו לנו כתנא קמא דאין שונים נהיו בשינוי שרי כדמוכח עובדא דביטהו דרבא שעה. So now, but something interesting here, that we said, right, resifting is not the same thing as sifting the first time, but nevertheless, right, even though we did allow to resift, but you should do it with a shinui. So why is that? So he says, right, that if we allow you to do it without a shinui, then you're going to come to do it, also not resift, but to sift for the first time. It gets confused, one with the other. So that's why they said, if you're going to do it with a shinui. What am I talking about? Resifting it, right? But sifting for the first time, as we said, right, we don't allow that even with a shinui. Okay, good. So he says, right, interesting, that it could be, he says, that really, it's really allowed to do this without a shinui. Like, it comes out from the wife of Rabbi Yosef. דהבה נהלה קימחה אגבה דמהותה אמר לה חזה דענה ריפתא מליה בענה מנח. כלומר, ואינך צריכה לשנות, ואפשר שלכך יביאו ויעריף בהלכות, תביטו דרב אשר הבא מחמרה נפשה, right? So, he says, right, that according to the story of Rabbi Yosef, his wife, who was doing it, apparently in the normal manner, so he says, it could be that's really the halakha, that we allow you to do it in the normal manner. So what does that mean? If you want to re-sift it, right, for the purpose of making it cleaner, according to that opinion, you could do it even in normal manner. We'll see what the halakha is, right? Okay. והראש כתב מה שהביא הריף הנתרי עובדה. Right, so he says, right, that Rosh brings these two versions of the story right, in the Rif. Even though apparently they're arguing with Rabbi Yosef, these two stories, because Rabbi Yosef doesn't require shinui, as we said. Lots of machlokat over here, right? Lots of different opinions here. Right? So it says, right, that Rav Asher does require shinui, right, as we said, according to what his wife did, right, his wife's custom there, right. So it says, right, mistama kelachak Rav Asher v'lo haya lo leavi uda de Rav Yosef. So it says, right, that apparently, right, halacha like Rav Asher. So therefore, he says he didn't really need to bring the opinion of Rav Yosef, right? Interesting, right? Okay, so right, let's go back to our rules of halacha, right? So why is the halacha like Rav Asher instead of Rav Yosef? Right. So the answer is, if you remember, we talked about this before. Rav Asher, right, was Batra. What does that mean? He was the last guy in the Talmud there. He was the one who redacted the Talmud. So usually the halacha is like the Batra, the last guy, right? The final right, codifier, the Talmud there, right? Whatever. We go like him. So therefore we pass like Rav Asher. That's what he says. So therefore, if we pass like Rav Asher, that means that you have to do with the shinui, right? Not like Rav Yosef. Okay, let's go on. אומר אני, דספירה דלא פליגי עדדה דשינוי דאגב מיכולתא לא בא, לפי שאינו נרקד יפה, והיינו דאמר רבי יוסף לרבי יוסף ריפתא מעליה בעינה, ואגב מיכולתא אין הפת יפה, אבל שינוי דפטורה באה, ודלא כרמב"ם. Okay, so he gets into some interesting details here, right? Nuances, right? Because we already mentioned before that there's two types of shinui, right, that we saw in the Talmud there. One type of shinui was that you use the back of the sifter, right, upside down. And then the other shinui we mentioned was doing it on the table, right, instead of doing it on a tray. So he says, right, that the table method is better, apparently, right, than the method of the sifter upside down. Anybody can guess why? The upside down sifter. Why isn't that so good? So the answer is, right, he says, because it doesn't really sift very well like that. You know what I mean? It's like, it's not the most beneficial way of doing sifting, doing it upside down, right? So so that's why if your purpose is to make the flour cleaner, right, more fine, so then you don't want to do it with an upside down sifter. You're defeating the purpose. That's the thing, right? So therefore, says the Ran, right, the more plausible opinion is the one that says you should do it on table, because this way, you can do a good job and sift it out really clean, right? To get your baguette. Okay. Nice and white. Okay, good. But in terms of health-wise, which one is superior, right? Doing like a fine flour or doing whole wheat? The truth is, today all the doctors they say, right, that whole wheat is better than fine flour. Everybody knows that, right? I've seen enough doctors in the last year to tell you, right, that they all tell me the same thing. All the doctors, and I have no lack of doctors the last year, right? So they all tell me the same thing. The whole wheat is better. It's more healthy. You know what I mean? So then, if that's the case, why do they really want like fine flour? The baguette style, because it tastes better. That's the thing, right? The baguette is more yummy. It's more, it's more delicious. But the whole wheat is more healthy. So there's no contradiction. They're both they both have their benefits, right? Whatever. Okay. But nevertheless, right? The sifted flour, the white stuff, the baguette, it's considered to be like more high class kind of eating. You know what I mean? More, high grade, right? Whatever, right? So you want that for the holiday, because the holiday is supposed to be, high class, supposed to be like fine eating, fine dining, as they say, right? So if that's the case, you should want to use the highest quality bread, not the healthiest bread. Who cares about health, right? You know, on the weekday you could do diet, but on Yom Tov and Shabbat you should be doing according to the good, to eating the best foods, the most delicious stuff. So according to that, really, the truth is that, unless you like have a great like love for whole wheat, I personally don't. By the way, I can handle it. Like it's fine. I can have whole wheat, but it's not my favorite. I mean, I have to tell you, like white bread is much better for me. So it tastes much better, So I enjoy it more, So what am I gonna do? Eat whole wheat on Shabbat and Yom Tov? I don't do that because you get the point, right? Okay, so I'm sure you understand what I'm saying. Okay, so right, that's the thing. So the rule is, on Shabbat and Yom Tov, as a general rule, you should eat the things that you like, don't worry about diet now, and this and that. Doesn't fit my diet, Well, who cares about diet? You're doing a mitzvah, right? Oneg Yom Tov, Oneg Shabbat, Who cares about diet? Unless you have some restrictions, in terms of your health, if that's the case, okay, maybe, right, whatever, right? The doctor told you, right? There's no other choice for you. Usually it's not like that, right? Usually you can have what you want pretty much, Okay, whatever, right? At least once a week, right? Whatever. Maybe not every day. Okay, you get the point. So it goes on here, right? B'divrei Rabbeinu kadat harosh, right? So he says Rabbeinu, right? The tour is like the Rosh. No surprise over there, right? He goes like his father. ונראה דבריהם שהם תופסים עיקר מה שפרשו התוספות באגבה דפטורה שהוא על גב השולחן ממש. So it seems like he says, right, that they explain that when they talked about the issue of sifting on the table, it means like the back of the table, like turn the table upside down, and sift like that, right? Can you imagine? והרב מגיד כתב פרק ג' דמהד אמר רבי יוסף דלביט הוא יש פוסקים קרב פפוס רב יהודה ששונים בלא שינוי וזהו דעת השגות וגם הרשב"א בעל העיטור הסכימו ששונים בלא שינוי, right? So right, it seems like there's other several rabbis here that they bring that they hold, that there was no shinui involved here. So okay, what's halacha, right? Bottom line, right? Here we go, right? Kevan Sharif Rambam Verosh הסכימו לדברי שינוי. So all these three, right? The big three, right? In America, we always talk about the big three. Right? In Torah also we have the big three, right? Lehavdil, right? The big three, the Rif, the Rambam, and the Rosh. Right? Hiskimu the by shinui that does require shinui. So therefore, halacha is right that you should do shinui in this case. So what are we talking about? What case, right? When you re-sift it, as we said, right? But if you're sifting for the first time, shinui doesn't help you. It's not gonna make it permitted. The by shinui hachi naktinan umiu beshinui daf al gab shulchan sagi ben tzarich shinui diachorei nefar. So he says, right? But as we said, but he points out, right? Then when we talk about the shinui, right? We're not going to tell you now to do it with the upside down sifter, right? Just do it on the table. That's good enough, a small shinui. You know what I mean? You don't have to go all the way out, right? To left field. So just do it on the table, instead of doing it on your in a container, right, in a bowl or whatever it is, right, or right, or whatever on your board, right, or whatever, God knows, right, whatever. So don't instead of the tray, do it straight on the table, right, and then you just gather it up and use it. It's a little bit messy, but it's okay. You'll survive. Okay. Very nice. Let's go on. So he says, Bet Yosef, furthermore, Grasina b'gemara Sham, Tana Kamed de Ravina, En shonin kemach b'yom tov, aval nafal tzaro o kisam borer be'ado, amar, So, right, there's another, right, Gemara that he brings over here. Over there, it says like this, right, that you can't even resift flour, right, on Yom Tov. Even resifting is not allowed. But right, if fell in there, right, as we said, right, a little pebble or a twig, so you have to resift it because of that. There's no choice, right? Borer biado. So he says, do it with your hand. That's also like a shinui, right? Instead of doing it with a sifter, you do it with your hand. Amale kol shekim de'asur dehavale keborer. So comes this rabbi and tells him, he says, "What, you're doing me a favor by telling me that? That's even worse, right? Why? Because now you're transgressing the prohibition of selecting, right? Which is also what I mean. So what does it help me to do it like that? To do it with your hand? That's even worse, right? So that doesn't really do the job. That's what this rabbi is saying, right? Ravina. Right? So says, right? Rashi explains, why is this worse than doing it with a sifter? So he says, because that's like prohibited from the Torah, so selecting, right? Prohibited from the Torah. It's even worse. So that doesn't really help anybody to do it like that. Okay. It goes on. Right? So he says, okay, interesting, right? So now, right, you should have asked the question when I told you this. The question should have popped up into your head. But isn't sifting also like selecting? It's the same thing. Like you're getting rid of the bad stuff and taking in the good stuff, right? Using the good stuff. So isn't that the same thing as doing it with your hand? What difference does it make? So he answers, the difference is like this, right? That when you're resifting for the second time, so there, right, it's not really called that you're selecting anymore, because you already did it one time. So there's no brand over here, right? What brand do you have? You already sifted it one time. There's no brand. So therefore, he says, right, the prohibition would only be rabbinical when you're resifting it. That's the difference. But if you're removing it with your hand, that's already prohibition from the Torah. That's even worse. That's what he's saying, right? Okay, good. כתב הרב מגיד, פרק ב' שלזה נתכוון הרעב"ד, כתב אם נפל בו צרו או כיסם אסור, ואם שינה מותר. So that's what the Ravad says, right? Also, that what? That if something fell in there, right, some kind of impurity, so he says that it's forbidden to resift it, but if you do it with a shinu, it's allowed. So he says, you know what that means? Don't do it with your hand, right? As we said, don't remove the pebble or the twig with your hand. That's from the Torah prohibition. So what do? Do do shinui, right? That's what you gotta do. אבל יוכל לשנות לקמח, right? לשנות לקמח, so what does that mean? You can use a sifter, right? That's a shinui. אבל הרשב"א פירש שמותר לסלקו ביד, וזה נראה דעת רבנו שלא כתב איסור נטילה ביד. Look, but interesting, right? But the Rashba seems to say the opposite, which is that he says you're allowed to remove it with your hand, right? Right? So how is that? So it seems like he doesn't paskin like this Gemara, You have to say that, I guess. Okay, interesting. אבל הכל בו, אבל הכל בו כתב בשם הרעב"ד, פעם השנייה מרקדין אותו ביום טוב, אם לא נפל בו צרור או כיסם. Right, but the Kolbo says a little bit differently, right? Name of the Ravad. He says that if something impurity fell in there, right? You don't have to do with a shinui, just do it straight out, right? Do a sift, sift it out. Mishum de michse keborer ve'im shina mutar. But it says if you do shinui, it's allowed. Yeah, so we have different nuances here, right? In all these opinions here, different ways of looking at this. והריף והראש לא כתבו הדרבינה. Look what he says, right? The Rif and the Rosh didn't write this Gemara of Ravina, right? ויש לתמוע עליהם, right? So he says it's a bit of a wonder there, right? Like, why didn't they write this Gemara? ויש לתמוע, והרמב"ם, למה לא פסקו כן? So, right, he says there's a question about them and the Rambam. Why did they paskin like this Gemara of Ravina that we just mentioned, right? Why did they reject this? What's the reason for that? The Batrahu. So he says, you know why? Because Ravina is Batra. What does that mean? He's also like the final redactor, right? Just like Rav Asher, right? They say, the rabbis, who redacted the Talmud? Rav Asher and Ravina, right? Those were the two guys who sealed the Talmud. So if that's the case, why don't we paskin like this? Good question. Nobody argues with him, so then we should paskin like that, It's not like Rav Asher is arguing with him, Then we could say, well, they're both equal. No, there's no machloket here. ואפשר שהם סוברים דרבינה כלפי מה שרצה ההוא דתני להחמיר בשעונים קמח בנתינת צרור, אמר דאם לא תמצא לומר דאסור לשנות קמח, כל שכן דאסור ליטול צרור, דהבה משמע דהבה דקתנא אין שונים קמח, אין שונים כלל, כאמר, ואפילו על ידי שינוי, אבל לדידן דקיימה לן דשונים על ידי שינוי, מי מודה רבינה דלא עדיף נטילת צרור משונים קמח, או אפשר לומר דוודאי אסור ליטול צרור או כיסם ביד, ולא כתבו פסקים גבי הרקוד קמח, לפי שאינו עניין להרקדה, וסמכו על מה שכתבו בדין בורר, וזה נראה יותר. Wow. Okay, so the Bet Yosef here has a very interesting solution about this, right? Why didn't these Rishonim paskin like Ravina? Why did they disregard this Gemara, right? So I'll read it one more time because I didn't catch the whole crux here, right, of what he's saying. So I'll read it one more time. Okay, so he says like this. Second. Right, so he answers. It says, it could be that they hold, right, these rabbis who omitted the opinion of Ravina, right? כלפי מה שרצה, ההוא דתנא קמא להחמיר בשונים קמח מנטילת צרור, אבל אמר דאם תמצא לומר דאסור לשנות קמח, כל שכן דאסור ליטול צרור, דהבה משמע דקתנא אין שונים קמח, אין שונים כלל. Right, so basically what he's saying is like this, right? That Ravina here didn't really mean to paskin differently than what we saw before, but his intention really was to negate, the version of the story here that was brought down by somebody, one of the rabbis. So the reason why he said what he said was to exclude the solution of this guy, right? This rabbi who said in front of him, right? Not like that. So that was his intention. His intention was to negate, right, this rabbi who was demonstrating something in front of him. And it's not really coming to argue with what we said before. Interesting. So then he goes on. Yeah. So in other words, what Bet Yosef is saying is like this, right? That Ravina was not here trying to change the halacha in any way. He wasn't arguing with what was said before. So his intention really was, right, just to show this rabbi, who said this in front of him in a different manner. He taught in a different manner to negate what he said, to cast him out. Right. So he was talking like more, like theoretically here to show him that he wasn't saying the right thing. So therefore, it comes out right that there's no machloket here between him and what we said before, right? And this is the reason why all these rabbis didn't bring Ravina, because it's not really any different than what was said before. That's what the Bet Yosef is saying. Okay, so then it comes out right that halacha is like what we said before. There you go. Okay, so let's see the Shulchan Aruch, right? And we'll see what's the bottom line here. A little bit tricky, right? Lots of opinions here. So let's see what we got. Shulchan Aruch Bet. So Shulchan Aruch, En merakadina kemach betchila, right? Lechatchila on Yom Tov, you should not sift flour. Afilu al shinui, even with a shinui, right? Doesn't help you. So don't try to pull some shtick, right? Tilt it, right, or whatever, or whatever, right? Or turn the sifter upside down, God knows what, whatever, right? It's not going to help you to make shinui when it comes to this. So we already said, right? What's the reason why? Because you could have done this before, So the rabbi said, like, why do this on Yom Tov? By the way, why were the rabbis so meticulous, right, to tell you here not to do this on Yom Tov? Like, what's the big deal, So, if I'm not mistaken, what we said before, it was mentioned already, is that sifting, is like a cumbersome kind of a job, it's like a lot of effort involved. So because of that, like the rabbis told you, like this is like a hard job, it's like labor, so like don't do this on Yom Tov if you don't need to, it's just it's certainly a lot of waste of time and effort going into this. So therefore, like why not just do this before? That's the thing, so therefore they forbade to do it even with a shinui. אבל אם רקדו מאתמול ונפלו בו צרור כיסם ורצו לכדו פעם משיח מותר אף בלא בשינוי, right? So he says, but if they already did it before Yom Tov, and then right some impurity fell in there on Yom Tov, whatever, right? So there was no choice. So then you can resift it, right? Even without a shinui, right? Even without a shinui. Okay. So says the Rama here. ויש אומרים דמותר ליטול על צרור או הכיסם בידו, אבל יש מחמירים מאוסרים, right? So he brings this machloket that we saw in the Bet Yosef, right? Some say you can remove the impurity with your hand, right? And some say no, don't do that. It's even worse, right? So it seems like we're gonna be stringent with that, right? You really shouldn't do it with your hand because some say this is like from the Torah, so it's really it's selecting, right? Got a problem there. So better to write. I think the proper thing to do is not to be lenient with this, to do it with your hand. What about if nothing fell in there, right? No impurity fell in, but he just wants to do it again, right? Second time, as we said, right? To have a nice, clean, flour, right? Nice, clean white flour. שיהיה יפה בפתנה, צריך שינוי קצת. So then you gotta do שינוי, a little שינוי, right? So what do we say, right? What kind of שינוי? כגון על גבי שולחן, right? Do it on the table, right? You don't have to turn your table upside down. Don't worry, we're not gonna go that far, right? So don't turn your table upside down. Just put the flour on the table and then gather it up and use it, right? That's the story. Okay, pretty straightforward, it all seems simple now, right? But before we were a little bit confused. Okay, so says the Rama, והוא הדין דמותר לעשות על ידי שאינו יהודי, אפילו תחילה רקדה אם ישנה קצת, right? So he also brings the other thing, right? The Ramah here that was brought in Bet Yosef. That what? What about if I want to do it with a goy, right? Can I tell the goy to do it? I'm not talking about resifting. I'm talking about, the first time. So what did we say about that? We said, right, you can tell the goy to do it with a shinui. If you want to sift the first time. Because as we said, right, with a Jew, it doesn't help you to do shinui with that. So, but by way of a goy, we allow it, right, with a shinui. So you tell the goy, right, my friend, can you sift it on the table? We Jews, we're like fanatics. We have all kinds of religious restrictions. So that's the way it is. He may have a hard time understanding that, but whatever it is, right? He'll get it. If he knows the Jewish people, right? The goyim, they know the goyim that work with the Jews, they know, right? That we have all kinds of restrictions, we have all kinds of things. They understand that. They got it. They get it. Right, so that's the story there, right? So yeah, that's the story. Okay, very good. So we have.
I have a question. So if you tell the goy to do it with a shinui, right?
Yeah.
You tell your cook, make sure
Right.
that you do this on the table, and they forget and they do it the ordinary way. Can you still use it?
Yeah, definitely you could use it. There's no question, right? Since the prohibition is only rabbinical, we're not going to say b'diavad, right? Don't use it. We're not going to put a fine on you, right? That far we're not going to go because it's not from the Torah, the prohibition, As we said, right? Because according to the Torah, you can do sifting on Yom Tov. There's really no problem with that, because you're doing it for consumption.
Okay.
Okay, very good. So if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, we'll stop here. Bezrat Hashem. I don't know, but people were asking tonight, right? Are we doing the class tonight? I was wondering to myself, why would they think I'm not doing the class? Maybe I went to Shemaim, to heaven to speak to Rabbi Shimon. I'm not that holy, believe me. I didn't go to speak to Rabbi Shimon, so I'm still here. Don't worry.
Didn't know if your shul was having a bonfire or something.
A bonfire. Okay, I got it. Okay, the bonfire. All right, there you go. So Bezrat Hashem, we'll catch you tomorrow. Bezrat Hashem. Don't worry, I'm not going to speak with Rabbi Shimon. I'm here. So I'll see you. I'll see you tomorrow. Bezrat Hashem. Chazak Baruch. Laila Tov.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you so much.
All the best. Bye.
Amen.